Welcome everybody to the SNN Network Australia virtual event. I'd like to introduce our next presenter. On behalf of the company Legend Mining Limited, which is a publicly traded company, the symbol is LEG on the ASX. I'd like to introduce Managing Director, Mark Wilson. Mark, take it away.
Thanks, Bobby, and good afternoon, everybody, and good morning for those listening in Australia. Legend is a exploration company listed on the ASX. We've got a market cap of 350 odd million Australian dollars. The picture that I've got on the front of our slide presentation, I chose in particular because I know that how companies manage and handle the COVID-19 situation across the globe is absolutely topical, whatever country you live in. Australia's been very fortunate in that we're a great big island. It means that our borders have been very easy to control. And when this demon hit, the pandemic, in March this year, the West Australian government actually closed our borders and, in the words of our Premier, made Western Australia an island within an island. And what that has meant is that mining industry, which was categorised by the state government as an essential industry, was allowed to continue, and exploration, being a part of that mining industry, was also allowed to continue. But of course, as we all know, social distancing and hygiene are the two weapons which each individual can practice and use to give you individually and your fellow citizens protection from this pandemic. And this photo was taken on site. You can see all of us socially distanced, 1.5 meters between us. We actually went to the trouble of getting the highest grade hand wash that we could get from a dentist friend of mine, and had that installed at our site and in our office and everywhere where Legend personnel worked. And the photo there gives you a landscape of what it's like 300 kilometres east of Kalgoorlie. And the tray that I'm holding is, because you can't see me, that's on the guide front row middle. Two geologists either side of me and one behind me at the back. And the other two fellas in the photo there are our field assistants who make sure that things all happen in a timely manner out there. But that tray is 5 metres of massive nickel copper sulfide, which is the pay dirt that we're looking for. And we'll now get into the story in a bit more detail. Just our usual disclaimer, which you can read at your leisure. The next slide really talks about the contents of what I'll cover off in this presentation. I'll give a nickel market commentary because it's fundamental to the operation, the investment case for Legend, run through our project, and in particular the Mawson prospect, which is where we found this massive nickel copper sulfide, and then wrap up with a summary and all talking about the Fraser Range. The shot there in the background is of a drilling rig, and obviously one of our senior geologists who is in that photo holding a piece of the precious core. So about the nickel market, I think it's just such a fascinating story, and the little graph that I've put up there is from Kitco. The blue line in the top is the nickel price in US dollars a pound, and the red line at the bottom is the LME, the London Metal Exchange inventory of nickel. And you can see that it's quite a volatile chart. For the last 5 years or so, Indonesia has become the epicenter of the world nickel market. it's important to understand that 70% of the world's nickel use goes into the stainless steel industry. And obviously the stainless steel industry is integrally connected with the GDP and the consumption of industrial type materials across the globe, obviously led by China, because China has been the consumer of 50% of all of these commodities for the last decade or so. What's happened recently is that China has recognised that this material from Indonesia, if they have to load it into barges and ship it across to China, handball it through their ports and off to their factories, it's a very cost-consuming exercise. And so they've moved their factories to to Indonesia. And what that has resulted in is a 20% saving in manufacturing stainless steel in Indonesia compared to manufacturing it in China. It is an enormous benefit to them, and that is where the stainless steel industry is tending to have its biggest growth, and therefore that's where the nickel consumption is having its biggest growth. But the nickel that we're chasing is the excitement machine of it does the heavy lifting in the electric vehicle battery market. And the take-up of this at this point in time is still modest, but the predictions of the international banks who look at commodity consumption prices, usage, etc., talk about the fact that by the time we get 5 years hence, out 2025 plus, you're going to see the sky's the limit for the EV use. And if nickel chemistries remain that key technology in the electric vehicle battery, you'll find what Legend's looking for is in high demand, and the expectation is that the price will not be what it is today. And indeed, there's a lot of commentary in international nickel markets as to whether you're going to get a bifurcation in nickel prices, where you'll get a class 1 nickel, which is the nickel that we're looking for, and a class 2, which goes into the stainless steel industry. But it gives an enormous positive profile for Legend, because traditionally it's a 5-year process from discovery to production, and all of Legend's nickel is still in the ground to be found. And in 5 years' time, that's when our expectations are to be producing, and hopefully into a marketplace that's very receptive and at a different price we are today. To get on to the Legend corporate slide, as I said, market capitalisation at 12.5 cents a share, 335 million as it is today. We've got a range of options. You North Americans would be more familiar with these described as warrants. They're deep in the money, but there's another $13 million of funding for Legend in those warrants across 2021 and 2022, which will add to the 31 million that we already have in our treasury as at the balance date of September just gone. One of the things that does characterise Legend from its peers is our single project, and it just enables a very easy assessment of the value of the company when you are just dealing with a sole project. But it's a very large project, and you'll see as we get into the presentation, there are many different prospects within that project that we can work towards. Our top 20 shareholders hold 65% of our stock, led by the Creasy Group, who's a very prominent, well-known Australian prospector, very successful. IGO, the only public company that's producing nickel in our backyard. And the Bailey Group is a high net worth from Perth, and Wilson Group is myself. And you can see that the remainder of the top 20 hold 11% outside those top 4. Our board of directors has a good balance of professions. Our chairman, Michael Atkins, comes from an accounting background and stockbroking. I'm a civil engineer. The refresh we've had on the board is our executive director, Oliver Kitty. He's a geologist. His last 10 years have been working with the Creasy group as their exploration manager. And Creasy's been very involved in all activities that have happened in the Fraser Range. And so Oliver's experience has enabled him to have his feet under the table at every one of those projects that Creasy's been involved in the last 10 years. And Tony Walsh is our company secretary, very respected member of that community and a great asset for us to have on our register. So the investment case fundamentals, the people I've talked about, our corporate and technical team. Our joint venture partner is Creasy Group and our major shareholder, IGO, with a regional experience. I've talked to the biggest block on the best street, which is our project. Nickel, our future-facing commodity, needs no further introduction. Discuss the cash. The story you're going to hear is one of a systematic exploration approach. And the Mawson discovery in December of 19 really changed the landscape from legend. And if you look at that graph on the right-hand side there, RKAC stands for Rockford Air Core, and you can see hole 151 that we drilled in December 2017 was really the start of our exploration success, rewarding shareholders with capital growth. The next air core hole, 183, happened a couple of months later. That led to the discovery of this Mawson footprint of anomalous air core, and it took a little time for us to get some funding in place to do the diamond drilling, which started in December last year with the success of RKBD, which is Rockford Diamond Drill, hole number 7, and then hole 8 in March this year, and the rest has been history. Our expenditure, around about $11 million a year, so you can see with a treasury of 31 million that we've got a sizable war chest to prosecute our case. This locates our project 300 kilometres east of Kalgoorlie, 1,000 k east of Perth. You can see this Trans-Australian Railway line runs right through the southern part of our tenements, which is a wonderful infrastructure asset to have in a pretty remote location, along with the potential of gas power from the Tropicana gold mine to the north. I think for North Americans, this is a very powerful slide because it talks about the analogy of what we have down here in the Albany Fraser Belt to the Thompson Belt in Canada. This slide was put up by IGO at a site presentation in August last year and talks to the same footprint, nominally 300 to 400 k in strike, 30 to 50 k wide. And in the Thompson Belt, there are these clusters of economic nickel copper sulfides, 2.7 million tonne in total. The Canadian Geology Society identified this Albany Fraser Belt way back in the 1960s as a prospective area and sent Newmont out here looking for this very valuable nickel commodity. It took until 2012 for the first discovery to be made here, which was made by a company called Sirius Resources at the Nova mine. This took Sirius on a ride from a 10 million market cap to 1.8 billion in 3 years. And the company that took them over that's currently producing nickel at this Nova mine is producing it at $1.60 US a pound. selling into a $7 US a pound market. It's enormously profitable. The amount of nickel in the Albany Fraser belt at the moment is only 300,000 tonnes. So you can see when you compare that to Thompson with 2.7 million tonnes, those of us who are the true believers of this belt only see enormous upside, which is what our Mawson prospect's all about. This slide talks to that. The left-hand side is a gravity map. I think the key story here is to look at those hot pink colours, which are the gravity highs. You can see in the orange map in the middle, Legend's ground position just about occupies all of that central hot pink area. So our land position is not only 19% of the belt, you could argue it's 50% of the best part of the belt, which are those hot pink colours on the left-hand side. The main players in this belt, Legend with its magnificent ground position, funding and people, Creasy, who's a private individual, and IGO, who is the active, publicly listed $2.6 billion company producing nickel at the Nova mine, and Galileo is another smaller company which has recently been doing some good work just south of us. If you want to invest in nickel in this area, Legend is your leverage play, and that's where you should be. If you look at the regional prospects, this puts our land position. Mawson's our lead prospect, and we'll talk a bit more to that when we get into it. This 3D gravity model really comes from this next slide, which will give you a little video covering some of the early stuff that I've already talked about, getting us from Perth to Kalgoorlie, east of Kalgoorlie. You can see the scale. You can see that Trans-Australian Railway line, which is the railway connecting the east and west of the country right through our project area. Zeroing in on where that Mawson prospect is, about 35k north of the line, with the other prospects, Magnus, Octagonal, Shackleton, Worsley, Early and Cream. This is a mag map showing how Mawson is in this western crunched up area of mag, quite different from the stratigraphy of the western side. Mawson intrusive complex itself is 16k by 6, 96 square kilometres. These are big areas we're talking about. The scale of this project is enormous. And if you look at the mag inversion model, the blue areas indicate the mag highs. That's a horizontal slice. All of those darker areas in between the lines are being interpreted as these intrusives. That's the detailed gravity that we did over the Mawson intrusion in the centre of this complex. It resulted us being able to do this gravity inversion model, which really models the denser rocks. And those denser rocks on top of our air core with the geochemical footprints aren't the ore body, but what they are is the ultramafics or the banded iron metaseds, which are the rocks in which we are finding the massive nickel copper sulfide at the moment. And if we start zooming out a bit now, you can see the areas where down to a depth of 1.3 kilometres, where we've got these intersections of the massive nickel copper sulfides, hole 21 and 23, which is the focus of our current work. And then again, zooming out as we head back out, looking at the air core anomalism, the geology interpretation in this particular area of the Mawson intrusion. And you're starting to get a scale of this project because we're back out at 16k by 6. And if you then go out further and you think about the 3,000 square kilometres, this is the story that Legend has. I'm getting too excited. I forgot to press the next slide button. Excuse me. But this is our geology map, talking to the anomalous nickel copper sulfides, the diamond drilling that we've done with the massive sulfides in holes 7, 8, 11, 13, 17 and 27. And it's really the fourth publicly disclosed known intersection of massive nickel copper sulfides. And if you go back to that Thompson belt analogy, you can understand why the market and ourselves got so excited about these discoveries. This is a picture of the Money Rock from hole 23. That rock, just to give it some numbers, is worth about 870 Australian dollars a tonne. Very valuable stuff with both nickel and copper and cobalt credits. It's within a 90-metre mineralised intercept, and within that there was 13 odd metres of the massive nickel copper sulfide. And the structural observations point to the fact it's been remobilised, and so we're not in the mother lode yet, but that's where we're heading. And this is just a drone footage of the project area, showing some of our diamond holes and where the EM conductors are that we're drilling. The EM is identifying conductive bodies, and nickel copper sulfide is conductive, and our technique is to do downhole EM and then get these conductors for future drilling. Our program's spending this $12 million a year. 2/3 of that's at Mawson with diamond drilling, RC drilling and geophysics, all working integrally together. We did an environmental survey. It's important to capture these things in the spring and the autumn, and meanwhile the regional work of geophysics and air core drilling's ongoing in the region. So, as a summary, a highly prospective project. The Mawson discovery changed our life. This systematic, persistent, committed, funded team, passionate about growing shareholder value, is where we're heading. So thank you for your attention to that. I'll now pick up a couple of questions that have come in a couple of minutes that I've got left. The first question is from Robert. Can I get down there? I can see the question. So what makes our project unique and different compared to your peers? I guess the uniqueness is obviously the commodity. Nickel is just nickel, and I think one of our great differences is this one project, which means all of our focus is just about nickel, about discovering it, and all in this area north of the Transline in the Fraser Zone. Another question from an independent research. Where are you up to with project development? Do you have a timeline? And what is the news flow going forward? These are very good questions. The project development is really at the exploration stage. What I like to talk to is if you're going to discover a mine, you need to tick 4 boxes. You need to have found the commodity. You need to find the grade, and you need to find the tonnes. And so we've got the first 2 boxes ticked in that we've found the massive nickel copper. We know the grade is sufficient. we look at the intercepts. The intercepts can be mined, but we need to find the tonnes. I really can't give a definitive timeline on that. It's like the age-old adage of how long's a piece of string, and all you can say is it's twice the distance halfway between the two ends. But the news flow going forward will be all about further drilling, persistent activity and systematic activity, and hopefully a lot more nickel copper sulfides. And the last question I have here, do you have a US symbol for Legend? We don't have a listing on the US exchanges, so you have to come down to the ASX exchange, and the ticker code is LEG. So that's about the lot for me. Thank you very much to Robert, Keith and the organisers, and you all go and have a good time now.
Thank you. This does conclude the webinar. You may disconnect at this time.